very good evening to you and welcome to London. Lies, accusations and counterclaims. The conspiracy to murder. Fresh allegations emerge in court in the trial of the British businessman accused of arranging the killing of his wife on honeymoon in South Africa. I'm Charles Onyegolu and this is the Africa Wrap. On tonight's programme, who knew what and when? The mechanics of murder are explored as the men accused of plotting to kill Shireen Diwani's new wife on his orders appear in the dock in Cape Town. Plus, Ebola is the world's biggest challenge since AIDS. That's the warning from a top US medical official. At the World Bank meeting today, West African leaders and the UN say things will get worse before they get better and appeal for more help now. And home again, apparently to a hero's welcome. But what damage has the Kenyan president's brief appearance before the International Criminal Court at The Hague already done to his country and his regional neighbors? We'll discuss. Also on the program, they came back to Africa with the best of the West, celebrating the culture and history of the continent's returned slave families. We explore the world of the Creole. A fixer given immunity by authorities investigating the murder of a woman on honeymoon in South Africa knew about the plot to kill her. A court's been told. Her husband, the British businessman Shireen Diwani, was yesterday accused of paying around $1,300 to have his new wife murdered 4 years ago. Diwani has denied he conspired with a taxi driver to stage a carjacking. He says they were kidnapped. The 34-year-old has already testified that his wife, Annie, knew he was bisexual and that he had used male prostitutes. But he says he did not arrange his wife's murder. Well, for the latest from the Western Cape High Court, let's hear from our South Africa correspondent, Mchelisi Masango, who's on the line now. Mchelisi, thanks very much indeed for joining us. What came out of those proceedings today?
Well, Charles, convicted killer Muzoma Dodakwabe today was still under a heated cross-examination exchange with Francois van Zyl for the defense and could not explain discrepancies found in his plea agreement and various affidavits regarding the murder of honeymooner Annie Diwani. Now, the defense attorney Francois van Zyl also handed up Zola Tongo's affidavit as well as Muzoma Dodakwabe's plea agreement in his initial affidavit to police. Now, Tongo, one of the other co-accused, had said in his affidavit he heard Mondem Bolombo speaking to Muzoma Dodakwabe over the phone to find a hitman, and that he did not speak to Kwabe directly at that stage. Now, the conversation was about a job that needed to be done and that a man was willing to pay in dollars, however, was not specific as to whom he wanted to kill. He did not specify that he wanted to have his wife killed until they heard their first meeting when Shireen Diwani is believed to have flown down from Joburg to Cape Town. Now, about the same event, Mbolombo said in his affidavit that he told Kwabe over the phone that Tongo wanted to speak to him, and he said he had then handed the phone to Tongo. So now Frank Sale wanted to know which version was true. He asked Kwabe whether he spoke directly to Tongo or did not in that first telephone call. So definitely the defense attorney trying there to pick in all those inconsistencies in his initial plea bargain, as well as what he's been telling the court.
Now, mention was made of a fourth accomplice in court. Do we know what his involvement was, and what did they say about him in court?
Charles, today they emerged another role player in the proceedings. Now, hotel receptionist Mondem Bolombo, whom I've just mentioned a couple of seconds ago, may have been more than just a middleman who was used to set up the honeymooner Annie Diwani's murder. Now, Francois van Zyl, for the murder accused, told convicted killer Muzoma Dodakwabe during cross-examination today that his claims about Bolombo only being the link did not add up because they had several interactions over the phone moments after Annie Dewani was killed, and he just felt that since they had actually had many more interactions, and those phone call records also show that Muzwama Dodaqwabe was on the phone on several occasions with Monde Mbolombo, did not just make Monde Mbolombo, just a middleman in this whole thing. Although Mbolombo got immunity from prosecution after offering to turn state witness in 2010, he just felt that some things just did not add up. He handed up a timeline of events that unfolded in November 2010, which the defense team compiled using CCTV footage and the Protea Hotel Colosseum in Cape Town, where Monde Mbolombo worked, and as well as other records. And he also highlighted a number of out calls between the two, as well as those text SMSs. So it's going to be interesting to see what's going to happen should Mbolombo be called into the stand.
Right. Now, there were some other issues that were brought up in court that resulted in the proceedings being disrupted. What more can you tell us about that?
There was a string of technical glitches in court today that saw the Deputy Judge President Jeanette Traveso lose her cool during proceedings. I mean, the audio in the courtroom is quite faint, and the judge had to lash out at the prosecution team as there were some problems encountered yesterday as well with the sound, and the acoustic experts had to be called in to come and sort it out, as well as she had asked them to get their act together, as this saw a few disruptions of the proceedings yesterday and for today. I mean, we lost almost up to 45 minutes of court time because of that, and we heard how the judge had to crack the whip and say if the prosecution is serious about having this case, wrapped up, they have to get their act together and ensure that the sound is tested accordingly every day before the proceedings start.
So proceedings resuming on Monday, what can we expect?
Well, Charles, sparks are expected to fly on Monday as the string of communication between Muzwama Dodaqwabe and the alleged middleman I've just mentioned becomes clearer. Will Gwabe be able to withstand cross-examination by providing a consistent version of events? And we're also expecting Xolile Mngeni to take to the stand as well as that British prostitute, which the state says is going to give evidence of his steamy romps with the British businessman. As the state feels this all speaks directly to its case of painting a picture of a man who was unhappy in his marriage and wanted out, even if it meant staging a hijacking and killing Annie Dewani. So it's going to be interesting to see it as we go back to court on Monday.
Mchalisi Masango, our South Africa correspondent there on the line from Johannesburg, thank you very much indeed. Now, cheering crowds have welcomed President Uhuru Kenyatta back to Kenya after his appearance at the International Criminal Court in The Hague. Mr. Kenyatta attended a hearing at the ICC yesterday, becoming the first ever serving head of state to appear there. He's denied charges related to inciting ethnic violence after the 2007 elections that left 1,200 dead and 600,000 displaced. Mr. Kenyatta has been charged with 5 counts of crimes against humanity. Arise News' Francesca Fanshawe has more.
Pomp and fanfare as Kenyan President Uhuru Kenyatta arrived home today. Thousands of supporters lined the streets, waving Kenyan flags and singing songs declaring his innocence. He returned from The Hague after his appearance at the International Criminal Court. The case was stalled yesterday after prosecutors accused Kenyan authorities of withholding bank and phone records, evidence they believe is crucial. They have asked for the trial to be adjourned indefinitely until it can be obtained, but there seems little chance of Kenyatta's government allowing that to happen. Kenyatta denies charges of acting as an indirect co-perpetrator in crimes including murder, deportation, rape, persecution, and other inhumane acts after the contested elections in 2007. The case has faced a series of delays since it was launched 5 years ago. It is being seen as a major test for the ICC, which has secured only 2 convictions in the 11 years since it was set up. Kenyatta was defiant as he left The Hague yesterday, saying to a crowd of supporters outside, "No one will set the course ahead for us. We will decide it for ourselves." And that mood continued today.
We are one, and there is nothing to fear because Kenya is stable.
Francesca Fanshawe, Arise News.
Well, despite the fanfare of that homecoming, some are saying that great damage has already been done by the allegations now defended by President Kenyatta. And not just to Kenya, but to the wider community of countries in that region. One of those to sound the alarm is the founder and CEO of the Kenyan-based international investment group FEP. That's John Kitaka, and he joins me now. John, thank you very much indeed for coming in. And of course, beyond the humiliation of seeing a president, a serving president, arraigned before a court of law. What impact is this having on businesses there? I mean, your organization helps to expand Kenyan businesses both regionally and internationally. What would you say, if any, impact has been had on business there?
Thank you. We can't ignore there is some impact. But for us, it is business as usual, because the president has said very categorically, this is a personal matter. And it is president himself who is accused. But Kenya as a country is not accused.
Well, I mean, the point, of course, is that it doesn't matter what he says. It's also the reaction of the markets, which are fairly independent of the president. I mean, what sort of impact do you think this will have on potential investors, on business generally? I mean, people wanting to do business there. The fact that, you know, there is the sense now that you know, the country could potentially become destabilized if the president is found guilty.
I will surprise you that in Kenya currently, we are experiencing the highest number of investors coming to Kenya.
Yeah, but that's before the trial.
Yeah, even now, all I can tell you is that there's a reality on the ground, that we are able to separate issues, and even the investors themselves, they are expressing even more confidence in Kenya than ever before.
Right. Would it have been worse if he didn't appear in court?
To me, his appearance was even a confidence builder.
Was that statesman-like, the thing to do?
Oh yeah, for me, he did the right thing. Where he is saying, I'm here. There's nothing to hide, nothing to fear, because he is confident that he is not guilty.
Now, the chief prosecutor called for sanctions against Kenya during the preliminary hearing yesterday. What do you think would happen if those sanctions were to be imposed?
Number one, you find that he was able to hand over the power as an expression that Kenya is an independent country, that with or without him...
No, we're not talking about him, we're talking about sanctions being imposed on Kenya. If, for example, there are people, because one of the big problems obviously coming from the ICC is that they've tried to get evidence, to get the Kenyan government to submit evidence, and the Kenyan government has been reluctant to do that. I mean, if sanctions were imposed on Kenya as a result of that, you know, evidence not being forthcoming, what sort of impact do you think that will have?
Of course, you cannot ignore there will be deliberate, obvious impact on the business environment. But I would also say that people are coming to appreciate the dynamics involved in the business world, where we are saying, a point come, you separate political issues, you separate personal issues, and appreciate that the Kenyan economy is one of the most stable economies in Africa.
But in the 21st century, a lot has to do with image.
Oh, yes.
And the impression people have. It affects investor confidence. It affects the way people perceive Kenya. Kenya is a big country in that East African region. It's the leading country. And its stability is absolutely crucial for the East African region. And of course, it's on its way to becoming an oil-producing country as well, which means that investors have to come in and all that sort of thing. I mean, do you think his being sort of not just going to court, but possibly being found guilty, what sort of effect do you think it'll have on the region?
I would say that the issue of the president being found guilty, it will have obvious repercussions. But I think one of the things you must appreciate is that at the moment, we have more investors, even as we talk now, coming to Kenya than ever before.
Yeah, but the point is that the world is watching
Yes.
this, okay? And as they watch it, obviously, as it unfolds, they're going to be watching Kenya's reaction. There's going to be more pressure from the ICC prosecutor on Kenya to submit evidence. If Kenya refuses to do that, this is taking place in the Netherlands, which is a country that is well known for standing up for human rights, even if sanctions are not imposed. Do you think the perception of Kenya is going to change to the extent that it affects business with Kenya?
I would say not exactly. One, you appreciate that there are created perceptions, but there's a reality on the ground. And that's why I can say, me being in the private sector, I can confidently say that the world has come to know that there's a difference between the created perceptions and the reality on the ground.
How important?
And that's why, as much as there's so much going on, when you come to the ground, I can tell you the Kenyan economy is on the upturn.
How important is foreign investment to Kenya?
Quite important, because Kenya is now running into the second world economy. And I would say that for us, that foreign investment and even the investor confidence is very important for every economy. And that's why even the government, under the new constitution, has been able to separate, where we are saying there's a separation of politics and the separation of the people running the economy. And that's why I would say for us, it is not the best thing to witness the father of the nation being embarrassed. But I also love the way he has confidently been able to say here, as a president of Kenya, Uhuru Kenyatta, this is a personal matter. But I want to separate the state from that kind of accusation. And I want to say we are happy as Kenyans to see what is happening, and we are really believing that all is going to be fine.
Okay, John Kitaka, founder and CEO of the Kenya-based International Investment Group, FEP, thank you very much indeed for coming in.
Thank you.
Well, time now for a roundup of the other major stories coming out of the continent of Africa tonight. The Ebola outbreak in West Africa is unlike anything since the emergence of HIV/AIDS. That's according to a top U.S. medical official. Speaking at a high-level World Bank forum about the crisis, the director of the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention said a fast global response could ensure that it did not become the next AIDS. The outbreak has killed more than 3,860 people, mainly in West Africa, including more than 200 health workers. Well, earlier today, a Liberian man died of the disease at a treatment center in Monrovia. The Ugandan-born doctor had been working at the country's largest hospital. In the last couple of hours, the UK has announced enhanced screening for Ebola. That's for all people travelling from affected countries.
Cases are growing exponentially. We need at least, as I said, 20-fold surge in assistance. Mobile laboratories, vehicles, helicopters, protective equipment, trained medical personnel, and medevac capabilities. We must work together to provide the best standard of care for each individual. Things will get worse before they get better. How much worse depends on us, the international community. So to all who have pledged, I say today, please deliver now. And for those who have yet to pledge, I say today, please do so soon. That's my urgent appeal. This is an unforgiving disease.
Well, meanwhile, Liberia's president says aid to fight the Ebola epidemic is arriving too slowly as calls grow for greater international efforts to fight it. Alan Rook has this report for the Africa Wrap.
This is a new medical centre for Ebola victims under construction in Liberia, the West African country worst affected by the current epidemic. Its president, Ellen Johnson Sirleaf, says they're glad of international help, but that it's coming too slowly.
We just need to see a little bit faster action, that's all. But certainly in terms of resources, both human and financial, as well as material, I think the response is well appreciated and is very good. We'd like to speed it up.
Latest figures from the World Health Organization now put the number of dead at nearly 3,900. The United Nations Special Envoy on Ebola says it's a world crisis, not just West Africa's.
It has the capacity to go anywhere in the world, and it has the capacity to cause illness anywhere in the world. That's why it's really important that the whole world comes behind the affected countries and helps them as quickly as possible.
The US has announced a 3,000-strong military mission to build treatment centres and train staff in the stricken areas. Britain on Wednesday said it was now sending 750 troops, aircraft and a naval vessel to help fight the epidemic. Aid organisations are also providing funds for clinics, medical equipment and supplies. Here in Sierra Leone on Wednesday, there was further good news. Burial teams who collect and inter the highly infectious bodies of victims ended their strike over unpaid risk allowance. Alan Rook, Arise News.
Well, fresh clashes have broken out in Bangui, the capital of the Central African Republic, amid growing tension between rival militias. The latest clashes are the fiercest since a UN force took over peacekeeping duties last month. Heavy gunfire and explosions were heard throughout the night and again today. Shops have shut and residents are staying indoors. At least 5,000 people have been killed in religious violence in CAR since this year. In tens of thousands of more have been displaced, suffering extreme hardship. The Red Cross says its workers have been unable to respond to calls for help after being threatened. A deadline for the resignation of interim President Catherine Samba Panza, issued by a Christian-dominated militia, expired this week. Now, Tanzania will hold a referendum on a new constitution following an opposition boycott of the drafting of the document and threats of protests against it, according to the president. President Kikwete said the referendum would probably be held after the electoral register was updated in May, but he hasn't ruled out a vote before that. An assembly dominated by the ruling Chama cha Mapinduzi party and its allies approved the draft earlier this month against the wishes of the main opposition groups. They walked out of the drafting, claiming they were being ignored. Now, Nigeria says nearly $5 million seized by South African authorities was money for legitimate arms deals and is calling for an immediate release of the funds. Nigeria says the money was for weapons to fight the Islamist insurgency in the northeast of the country. South Africa froze nearly $5 million claimed to be for the purchase of ammunition. The move followed the seizure last month of more than $9 million in cash from a private jet. Well, the row appears to be escalating. This day newspaper, Nigeria's biggest selling daily, is reporting that the Nigerian government is now threatening sanctions against South African interests in Nigeria. South Africa's High Court has overturned the murder and attempted murder convictions of one of the country's best-known rappers. A court convicted Malemo Jube Marahonye of murder and attempted murder in 2012 after he killed 4 pupils and wounded 2 others while drag racing. Well, yesterday the High Court convicted him of culpable homicide or manslaughter and halved his 20-year prison sentence. Well, a lot more still ahead here on Africa Wrap tonight, including celebrating the culture and history of Africa's returned slave families. We explore the world of the Creole. Stay with us.
Wherever and whatever your banking needs, Guarantee Trust Bank will be there, now and into the future. Because you're at the heart of everything we do. Guarantee Trust Bank, proudly African, truly international. International.
We're the first international television crew to visit the scene of Boko Haram's most audacious attack. We're in one of the dormitories where the insurgents came in and abducted the girls.
Okay, the time that this thing happened to us, we are in the school, so we are sleeping in the room, and we are hearing the gun.
The teachers ran away and left them alone.
There is some anxiety here as we prepare to show the Boko Haram video of the abducted girls to their families.
Now I am feeling happy because we see our friends, but we want to go and bring them for us.
For Arise News, I'm Charles Onyegolu in Borno State. You're watching the Africa Wrap here on Arise News, broadcasting to Africa, Europe, the United States, and around the world. You can find out more about us online by visiting arise.tv. This is the program that's dedicated to Africa. If it matters there, we'll be talking about it right here every night at 1800 GMT. And what we're talking about right now is telephones. Now, mobile phone users in East Africa will soon enjoy cheaper cross-border calls after telecom operators agreed to cut roaming charges. The move will affect Kenya, Rwanda and Uganda, 3 of 5 countries that make up the East African community, seeking to improve trade between their economies. So what will this mean? Well, charges for making or receiving calls in other countries in East Africa will be cut by more than 60%. A move which could benefit a combined population of more than 94 million people. Now, this week, the International Monetary Fund forecast economic growth this year to exceed between 5% and 7% in 2014 in the 3 nations. Well, joining me now is our Africa business analyst, Bode Ososami. Bode, businesses often moan about high roaming charges. You know, it's exceedingly high. How much will this improve trade between those economies?
Definitely, this is good news. We've been talking about economies of scale and regional integration and reducing the cost of doing business and being more competitive. And this is an indication that even if it's a small step, it's in the right direction. It will encourage more partnerships, more interaction between these regions, which we've often said is necessary to build larger businesses and achieve growth, get some synergies from coming together across borders, especially in East Africa.
Now, the governments of the region have been rather slow to move to the plan for a common economic zone, which was supposed to take the region sort of forward. But they suddenly seem to be, you know, doing things very quickly. Why now?
Yeah, actually, I wonder myself. It may be, you know, the U.S. Africa Summit emphasized a lot of these issues.
You think they suddenly became aware of the extraordinary opportunities?
I think there's an increased awareness. By the time you keep repeating the same things over and over again, I think there's a time when people begin to move. There's an increased awareness on what to do and the importance of cooperation between countries and creating regional blocks. And like we said earlier, the East African countries seem to have that affinity that enable them to move faster in this area. And reducing costs of doing business as a region certainly is one way of encouraging all these partnerships.
But of course, we're talking about 3 countries. The other 2 countries, Burundi and Tanzania, have not quite moved as fast. Do you think they will be forced to follow suit?
I think they would. They're smaller countries, poorer countries. I think once the modalities have been worked out, I see them joining. And even South Africa and some of it going further down, it's possible that we begin to see more of the integration we've been talking about happening on a larger scale than we've seen before.
But of course, those 3 countries that we're talking about, I mean, they seem to be moving rather fast. They've now launched a joint tourist visa and are building a new transport corridor that is supposed to link the Kenyan coast with the hinterland, with railway lines and an oil pipeline and all that sort of thing. Very ambitious.
Yes, indeed. And financing, we understand the Chinese are helping them with funds. Kenya, Uganda, and Rwanda are standing out, especially in terms of being very business-minded. In spite of all the issues and the challenges they have, Rwanda in particular is trying to make itself even more competitive, although it's one of the most competitive nations in Africa. The small size makes it easier for them to push some of these reform, unlike larger economies where there are far more complex issues to deal with. But definitely, I can see them becoming even more competitive than they used to be.
Now, briefly, this week the International Monetary Fund forecast optimistic economic growth this year. Is that a sign of changing things for East Africa?
Well, the forecasts, is that the one for Africa or East Africa alone?
Well, I mean, East Africa, even though obviously the IMF is always quite mercurial when it comes to these predictions. Because, I mean, it's just emerged from Ghana, where it hasn't been that optimistic.
That's what I wanted to say, because...
Yes, and then it's moved on. So it's talking about East Africa now.
When you're talking with the IMF, you need to know exactly what you're
Absolutely, no, you're absolutely right. You can't make blanket sort of assessments.
No, you can't make blanket assessments. So I think the announcements I heard were for Africa in general. And what they're saying is, in spite of Ebola and some of the issues, Africa is still growing, and obviously there are challenges, insurgency, reform, corruption, but the overall story is still positive, and there are indications that even though they may not achieve the high, maybe 6-7%, but certainly Africa will still grow at over 5% to 6% on average, which is still very good compared to what's happening in other parts of the world.
Absolutely. Now let's move on and look at African banks and their profits. And we're talking specifically about Nigeria, where growth in assets and earnings of banks is expected to fall, which is really quite surprising, in the next 18 months. Why is that?
It's not surprising. One of the first things they teach you, or they taught me about banks, when you want to look at a sound bank, you don't look at the earnings, you don't look at the profit and loss, you look at the balance sheet. And you don't look at the size of the balance sheet. You look at the quality of the items on the balance sheet.
But is it the way they're managing the banks?
So what they're doing, I'll try and explain, what they're doing is moving to quality. The banks are now expected to have more capital. They're going to be doing bigger deals in power sectors and other sectors. So they need far more cushions. The quality of their balance sheet has to be stronger. So they are now asking them to have more reserves. And so, but if you have more reserves and more cash reserves as a proportion of your public sector funds, more capital reserves as a proportion of the risks that you are carrying. But if you put more in reserve, you have less to borrow out, less to lend out. And, the main income from banks come from lending. So when they can't lend out, what they have left, they have to keep in treasury bills, which don't give much income.
Well, I mean, you sound like the governor of the central bank there. I mean, so I think sitting on your high perch, the governor, proselytizing.
I think they know what they're doing. They're trying to ensure that the quality is there, and I think that's a good thing.
Well, I mean, the bank executives don't agree. I mean, they feel that all these new sort of policies and measures are stifling their growth.
I think they're worried about their earnings. We've seen the era when banks had huge earnings and huge balance sheets, buildings and bad loans, and we know what happened. And the new central bank governor has a more technical, more conservative background. I think he's being careful. Now that the banks are going for Euro bonds and offshore lending, offshore borrowings, they've got to be sure that they have the quality that match other banks in the world. So that's why we are seeing all these things. I'm not worried about banks having lower income. I think the issue is what is the quality of their balance sheet. If the soundness is there, as they're able to borrow, to lend out, they will be when the institutions are there for lending, because that's another issue. Because you can't just lend to anyone just because you have the capital. And as you know, in Nigeria, we're just having a development bank to help SMEs. We don't have credit risk rating systems like you have here. So many things that need to be there to help banks lend properly are still being developed.
So you basically agree with the central bank that they, in their move to sort of raise standards and ensure that, you know, the banks expand their capital base rather aggressively.
Exactly. What they're doing is raising standards, and that will come at the expense of earnings. And for growth, we look to reforms, not just monetary policy. So, you know, as we've been hearing from government, reforms are taking time to come through. The reforms in the power sector, in the agri sector, these are the things that will drive growth, not capital that is being put in the banks. Because if you just throw capital at banks, you know what will happen. They would lend carelessly.
Bode Ososemi, our African Affairs business analyst. As always, brilliant stuff. Thank you. Well, let's look at some stocks. Shares in Aspen Pharmacare jumped more than 4% after the South African drug maker announced an agreement with GlaxoSmithKline to extend its foothold in Japan, the world's second biggest pharmaceutical market. But in the country's manufacturing sector, data was more positive. Factory output fell less than expected, contracting 1.2% in August from an 8.1% contraction in July. Now, currencies, South African government bonds rallied to their firmest level in a month, and the rand held near 3-week highs as the emerging markets received a boost from the US Fed minutes overnight. Kenya's central bank bought $56 million of the local currency in the forex market to strengthen the shilling against the US currency. Now, health authorities in Nigeria are relying on new technology to keep one step ahead of the Ebola epidemic. A smartphone app has slashed reporting times, with reports the World Health Organization could declare Nigeria officially Ebola-free before the end of the month. Arise News' Erin Rohn has more.
With the Ebola epidemic continuing to spread across West Africa, health workers in Nigeria are relying on their phones to keep one step ahead. A smartphone app developed by a Californian-based not-for-profit company in conjunction with UNICEF has helped to cut the time it takes to report the onset of symptoms.
We use the mobile telephony to send out SMSs. The government did to those 125 million lines. I have mine. I was trying to pull it up on my phone just to show you. So with that, we're able to tell every household what it looks like, the symptoms, everybody who had a phone.
Before the app was launched last month, the reporting time for new cases of Ebola was around 12 hours, with most records being handwritten. Reporting is now almost instantaneous. It's also allowed lab technicians to upload test results, which are then sent to teams on the ground. While a group of volunteers has been utilising social media platforms with the hashtag Ebola Alert to keep Nigerians up to date. The Nigerian Health Ministry is hopeful with the help of the app, the World Health Organization will declare the country officially Ebola-free later this month. Erin Rohn, Arise News.
Now, despite Ebola regionally and weaker than expected economic growth globally, African economies are forecast to continue to expand at a moderately rapid pace, with regional GDP growth expected to strengthen to 5.2% yearly in 2015-2016 from 4.6% in 2014, as we heard Bode Ososemi saying there. That's according to the World Bank's new Africa's Pulse, a twice-yearly analysis of the issues shaping Africa's economic prospects. So, good news despite it all. I'm joined now by Agnes Gitau of the East African Economic Chambers of Commerce to discuss the prospects of the next few years. And with her, still here, is our own Africa business analyst, Bode Ososemi. Thank you very much indeed for coming in, Agnes. Now, lots of public investment in infrastructure, increased agricultural production, expanding services in African retail, telecoms, transportation, finance, all these expected to continue to boost growth in the region. But the key question, of course, is how does this impact on the ordinary person on the street?
Charles, isn't it great to have a positive story on Africa for once? You know, you've had challenges of Ebola, Boko Haram, Al-Shabaab. So this, you know, latest report by World Bank is certainly great.
Well, I mean, let's be honest, it's always been this positive for the African economies.
but
the question has always been, is it touching the ordinary person on the street?
Slowly but surely it is. Whether, you know, you've had report that the Africa Rising story is actually a myth, I want to say that you can actually beat on the ground. Of course, there is poverty in Africa, but you can already start seeing this growth trickling down to the common man. You've seen a growth in middle class, you know, people not necessarily from rich families making it. And this has been fueled by investment, enabling environment by businesses, but also, which is very critical, is a political leadership throughout Africa that is focused on economic development, not driven by politics, no. So yes, to answer your question, it is certainly showing changes on the ground.
Your considered analysis, Bode, because of course part of this new African outlook is commodity prices, and is that good or bad?
Well, the
dependence on commodity.
The dependence on commodity prices is something that is changing, but it's going to take time. The diversification is not going to be done overnight, but definitely African countries need to diversify from just being commodity driven, and they need to come up the value chain, do a lot more manufacturing, industrial production. And just referring to the earlier question, I also wanted to add that it takes time to see, these are not quick wins, infrastructure, power projects, and the investments that we see now. And these are the tougher things that need to be done, that people don't want to do. But when you get them done, you will begin to get the gains maybe 2-3 years down the line. By the time Nigeria begins to enjoy power the way telecom is now taken for granted, you would see that then we'll remember all the troubles it took to set up institutions and to go looking for funds, the unbundling. And while all that was going on, people were saying, where's the electricity? So I think we should wait, give the reform and give a lot of the investments time. You know, you don't build railway overnight and then suddenly begin to see an impact. It's going to take some time. So commodity prices, I'm not worried. Countries have to have cushions. That's the issue. You must have your fiscal cushions, because no doubt commodity prices are going down. That is clear from the market. I believe most African economists know that. So you must have the right cushions, and Nigeria has 7 months import cover. South Africa has about 5 to 6 months. So many of the countries are now being sensitive. Kenya has been warned that it needs to be careful because, you know, it could be hit by some of these commodity issues. But over time, we know that diversifying the economy is the way, and that's what the countries are doing.
So what are the potential downsides to this glowing new image of Africa as the place to sort of put your money in and invest and so on?
The potential downside is politicians, you know, using this as a political rhetoric. But I will tell you that the private sector is very much engaged throughout the region. It doesn't mean Nigeria, Kenya, everywhere. So the politicians need to take this story as a challenge. They need to be able to translate this to real growth that has an impact on the people.
And of course, there are lots of risks. I mean, there are rising fiscal deficits in a number of countries. There's economic fallout from the activities of terrorist groups, as you mentioned, like you know, Boko Haram and Al-Shabaab. And of course, the Ebola epidemic in West Africa. I mean, I think you actually talked about that in one of your briefings recently, the impact or the potential impact that Ebola could have on the economies of Africa. Because what is happening is that you're finding that because travel between countries and so on is being affected, the women who sell rice can't cross over the border to sell their rice, and people are being stuck at home and all that sort of thing.
Absolutely. But, you know, these challenges for Africa, we need to look at them as opportunities. You know, the underdeveloped infrastructure, that's an opportunity to invest. The underdevelopment education and health sector need to be seen as, but suddenly Ebola, World Bank estimates about $32 billion has been lost, you know, and between the countries that are heavily affected by Ebola. But we need to look at these and seize the opportunity of this story and use it to be able to provide to our people.
Now, Bode, the World Bank report also talks about Africa largely bypassing industrialization as a major driver of growth and jobs. Instead, according to the study, extractive industries, and I think you touched on this, in natural resources sector and a surging service industry are propelling Africa's growth. Is that sustainable?
It's not sustainable, but what I think is happening is the industrialization is not happening as quickly. There's a lot of service-type businesses, but manufacturing, which requires long-term financing and more institutional support, is not moving as fast. But certainly that's not a sustainable situation. So even if there is growth, what that just tells us is Africa would have been growing much faster than it is now, and the infrastructure gaps that we have, the gaps in the financial institutions in terms of having development funding and proper mechanisms to give access to finance, especially in the manufacturing and small, medium enterprise sectors. All these gaps are opportunities that would have made us grow even faster. So Africa could be a 7%. There's at least 2% GDP there that we can't really do anything about until all the institutions and all the things that need to be in place get into place.
Okay, Bode Ososami, our African Affairs business analyst, and of course Agnes Gitau of the East African Economic Chambers of Commerce. Thank you very much indeed to both of you. Well, let's look now at some more stories coming out of the continent of Africa this Thursday night, and we start with some mass fundraising. A campaign against breast cancer called Pink October has officially kicked off in Algiers. It's part of the global campaign which urges people to organize Pink Days, building support and raising money for Breast Cancer Awareness Month. Government officials have announced that a census of cancer cases is now underway across the country to develop a national cancer registry. They've also confirmed that new anti-cancer centres are included in the country's cancer plan. They'll be operational by the end of the year as older centres are reopened after renovation work. Now, a scientist from Kenya is speaking out about the importance of more women choosing careers in science. Nina Wambiji, a leading researcher in her field, has made a film about her work with a fishing community in Msawambweni and back in her lab in Mombasa, working with a development program for some of Africa's most innovative female agricultural scientists. Nina is now outlining the need for mentoring to encourage more women in Kenya to become fisheries researchers.
It's been an eye-opener. It's given us the skills to learn how to write proposals, how to write manuscripts. Just the other day I've come back from Uganda to do a leadership and management course. So it shows you how you can reach your potential and how you can do it not by yourself and also with a network of women and men in the scientific field.
Now, Commonwealth ministers hoping to combat poverty and improve the livelihoods of millions of citizens have launched what they call a development toolkit containing information about grant funding. The handbook guides the poorest and most vulnerable African nations belonging to the Commonwealth on financing their particular growth goals. The first of its kind, the toolkit features ideas on identifying, evaluating and selecting spending options to boost development plans. Now, an African is among the 3 finalists for the European Union's Award for Human Rights and Freedom of Thought. Congolese gynecologist Denis Mukwege has been nominated for the prestigious Sakharov Prize, and we'll find out if he's won next Tuesday. Mukwege specializes in the treatment of rape victims. He's also the founder of the Panza Hospital in Bukavu in the Democratic Republic of Congo, where he offers both medical and psychological help to women and child victims of sexual violence. Now, horses, pageantry, faith and loyalty. The famous Durbar Festival is underway in northern Nigeria. Dating back hundreds of years, the festival begins with prayers before a spectacular show of horsemanship accompanied by musicians and displays illustrating regional traditions. The main aspect is the horse charge in front of the emir outside his palace. The annual festival is celebrated in several cities in northern Nigeria. Some of the most popular are in Katsina, Kano and Bida. Now, the Creole people are an ethnic group based in Sierra Leone, the descendants of liberated slaves from Britain and North America. These freed slaves, many of whom fought in wars, were resettled in Freetown, where their cultures blended, creating new languages. Today, the Creole account for 4% of Sierra Leone's population. Elaimide Thomas is from the Creole Descendants Heritage Committee. She joins me now along with historian Nigel Brown-Davis. Thank you very much indeed for coming in. I'm talking about wars. I mean, they not only fought about their resettlement, I mean, they've been involved in all the recent spate of coups and counter-coups and wars in Sierra Leone.
Well, the Creoles? Well, we had a civil war. I think you know that we've recovered from a civil war.
Yeah, but even before the civil war,
well,
lots of coups and counter-coups.
I wouldn't necessarily say that was to do with the Creoles per se, because the Creoles are not known to even be in politics. That's one of the things I'm hoping we'll discuss, that they never entered politics. They entered the professions, medical, lawyers. That's what you find Creoles being even today.
So it was the indigenous people fighting amongst themselves?
It was mainly the politicians. Let's put it this way. Creoles are not notoriously politicians as such.
Right, but of course you're a historian. That one of the places that the Creoles are also noted for is their contribution during, I think, the Second World War, wasn't it?
Yes, they certainly did have a contribution in the Second World War in fighting in the RAF, in sort of serving the Sierra Leone Defence Corps and also other areas of the military as well. So they certainly did play a role.
Now, I mean, in some ways, the Creole was a bit of an experiment, wasn't it? I mean, you know, you had freed slaves coming from Britain, Canada, that's Nova Scotia, and the US, the Caribbean, all being resettled in Sierra Leone, almost, although most of them, well, let's face it, it's sort of a cycle. I mean, it's sort of a full circle, wasn't it? Because there were descendants of Africa taken away and then brought back again, but were completely different identities when they came.
Indeed, but you left out one big lot. Most of them were from Africa. You know, the liberated Africans who came from along this, what was known as the slave coast, as far down as Congo. And
yes, all the way down that sort of west coast and central sort of Africa.
So it was like blending all these people who had different languages as well, although I think Nigel will confirm it was mainly the Yorubas. They had a good proportion of the liberated Africans were Yorubas. And they were all sort of thrown into this melting pot, which evolved to be Creoledom, and it included Europeans as well, which is why our heritage is so rich.
It's extraordinary, isn't
yes,
it?
Yes.
And what I'm fascinated about, beyond the bigger historical picture, is jollof rice. Was it created by the Sierra Leoneans or the Nigerians?
Neither.
Well, how did it come into existence?
As far as I know, jollof rice is Gambian.
Okay, is it Gambian?
You know, yeah, this is, you know...
Actually, that's a very good point.
You know, but
let's get the historian to confirm that. Is it the jollof from the Wolof, or is it jollof from Sierra Leone and Nigeria?
I'd love to say Sierra Leone, but I do believe, I can confirm with the Amide that it is actually from the Gambia, yes. So I think that's probably the best possible theory as to where it came from.
But of course, sorry to interrupt you there. I mean, those Creoles also brought with them a lot of influence from the West, didn't they?
Yes, I mean, they certainly brought in a lot of Western sort of dress. They also brought in Western type of food as well. They sort of regular meals that you have in sort of Britain and America, they sort of brought into Africa. Religion, in terms of Christianity, they were, you know, mainly Christians, Methodists, Baptists, and Anglicans as well. You have a lot of sort of Church of England members in Sierra Leone today because of the Creole influence.
Now, we've got the picture of a typical sort of Creole house there, influenced by architecture. You can see it there from the United States. Tell us a bit about something like this.
Well, that's a sort of a typical sort of what they call in Creole bodos. It's a board house, sort of a display of sort of or sort of a mixture of sort of American architectural styles. You've got sort of the stone foundation. You've got also the shingle roof and the sort of the wooden superstructure as well. And that's sort of a reflection of the fact that a lot of the blacks came from North America. They'd been sort of slaves before in the American Revolutionary War, and then were taken across to England and to sort of Nova Scotia, and then brought to Freetown. And they brought that architectural style with them as well.
I suppose it is fair to say that the Creoles formed a sort of bourgeois class, didn't they?
I suppose it is fair to say that. Can I just go back? You know the house, just a little story quickly. When I first went to America at the age of 12, I was fascinated when I saw these houses, which were so, you know, like the ones I'd seen in Sierra Leone. And it took years for me to know that that was part of my heritage, because obviously at 12 you don't know that Nova Scotians, you know, went and built houses there that they were used to in the Americas.
And those houses tend to be found in sort of Southern America, isn't it?
Yeah, that's it.
A lot of them,
and parts of the Caribbean as well.
And of course, a lot of the Victorian dresses that were worn by the women, are they still popular today?
Well, we have, I don't know if they have the image, but the cabaslot and kotuku is, I mean, what I have on is a Creole dress, but this is not your typical cabaslot. The cabaslot is a long dress with the
well, we can see the photo
that's it.
of
If you look
right
at those women now, they will not be out of place in Victorian England. What do you
yes,
think?
No, absolutely. Yeah. Quite extraordinary. Isn't it?
That's it, and that's a typical Creole dress, yes.
Now, the Creole Descendants Union Heritage Committee, there's an event coming up which will focus on famous Creoles who have had an impact on Britain. Tell us a bit about that.
Well, what we're trying to essentially focus on is people who have made a contribution to modern Britain. So people who have fought in the war, who perhaps fought against racism and that sort of affected British colonial policy towards Sierra Leone and also the other West African colonies. So, you know, two of the figures I can mention we've focused on is, for instance, Adelaide Casely Hayford, who advocated African dress, was quite a feminist and advocated sort of independence for women. And also, for instance, John Henry Smythe, who fought in the Second World War as a Royal Air Force officer.
And, of course, you've got the very notable Dr. Davidson Nicol, who completed the formula for insulin. And we've got his picture up on the screen right now. And he was studying at Cambridge.
That's right, yeah. And although he went to London University as well, and he was a friend of my father, so I knew him. You know, so it's amazing when I found out what he'd done as part of his PhD, because he changed, you know, treatment.
Well, he changed the world.
This is it. So that's one way that they've impacted on Britain. You have Dr. Africanus Houghton, who was the first to write about sickle cell, you know, and these are people who came, well, Africanus Houghton wrote his book in 1874. Sickle cell was discovered in the West in 1910. So look at the gap.
Extraordinary.
You know. Yes.
So now this is Black History Month in London, the UK. What's being done to mark this extraordinary heritage?
Well, what we're sort of doing is sort of giving a series of presentations, quiz nights as well, that sort of mark the heritage of the Creole people. So what we're trying to really do is engage the community and get them educated about their heritage, because as we mentioned, a lot of people do have these relatives and friends of their family who did such amazing things, but some of them are not even necessarily aware. And so what we're trying to do is raise awareness about what the Creole heritage is about to Sierra Leoneans, non-Sierra Leoneans alike, and to sort of raise this sort of awareness.
And of course, the Creoles had a very strong focus on education, didn't they?
They did indeed, yes, which is why you find that, I think in the
there was a famous university, was it
Furabe College? It was the Sub-Saharan, the first Sub-Saharan university. It was affiliated to Durham University, so when you got a degree from there, you were effectively Durham qualified as well. And people used to come from Ghana and Nigeria to go to that university.
Yes,
you know, when you mention it to sort of people around that time, they tell you their dad or something.
It's a famous university. Now
yes.
You're part of the Creole Descendants Union Heritage Committee here in London, and you're hosting an event tomorrow. Where is that event taking place? How can we see it if we want to?
Well, the event will be taking place at St. Peter's Church, the Crypt, and so that's in Southwark, in southeast London. So if people want to come, they should come around 6 o'clock, and we'll have presentations, a quiz night. There'll be food there as well available, and you'll be able to meet some of the relatives and friends of people who are actually figured in the actual presentations and who have actually contributed to modern Britain.
Well, the key thing is, will there be jollof rice there?
Is that the only reason why you'll come, Charles?
No, of course not.
No, we're going to have Creole food, Sierra Leonean food. And
Thank you very much indeed to both of you for coming in. And that's your Africa Wrap for tonight. See you tomorrow. Bye-bye.